Welcome in, everybody, to Fantasy Pros. This is the Fantasy Football Podcast. It is me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, and today it's time to make some important trades. The NFL trade deadline is today, but our trade deadline looms for another few weeks, so there's still moves to be made. We'll see what impact the NFL deadline has on some moves we'd like to make, but speaking of moves, we're going to talk about the running backs and more right here, the wide receivers as well, right here on Fantasy Pros, so make sure you're always subscribing to our YouTube channel to help us make some moves. Andrew Erickson, my good pal, and one of our favorite folks here who's going to be joining us today over from the Roto Baller. He's a baller. He's a Roto superstar on the X. It's Brandon Murchison. Now, Murch, you are possibly one of two things. You are either Joe Pisapia with the bald cap for Halloween today, or you are even more Southern Derek Brown. I'm not sure which one. Which one do you think is more appealing to be for Halloween, and which one would get more candy? That's probably the bigger question.
That's a great question, Joe. And I would say the one to get more candy would be more Southern Derek Brown.
More Southern Derek Brown. Probably more polite. Yeah.
More polite, a little bit, But no, I think I'm going to go with a cross between the two today. I am Southern Joe Pisapia and
Joe Bro.
Derek Brown. Joe Bro. Let's go Joe Bro today.
I love it. Andrew Erickson. For those of you obviously out there, we know that it's trick or treat for Erickson too, because he finds out if he has jury duty later today at 3:00. So hopefully you'll dodge that bullet. We'll see how that goes for you. But let's talk about some of the pieces to acquire. And don't forget, use the tools on my playbook, use the trade finder, use all of the tools available to you and the trade analyzer to make sure that you can get the best trades out there to make sure you're fortifying your roster for the stretch run into the playoffs. Download my playbook. The app is free. Go to fantasypros.com/myplaybook to do that. And of course, you can go premium and use all the better tools that are even available to you. Over 1 million teams have already synced. If it's not one of yours, I don't know what you're doing with your life. You got to make these good decisions. Let's start here with some of the most traded running backs here. And let's start with Javonte Williams, because this is a player that a lot of people right now are trying to figure out what to do with. Javonte Williams is that guy right now who's coming off a good trend here in the last few weeks. Javonte, arguably the best games of the season the last 2 weeks. So, Brandon, we'll start with you. Do you want to buy, sell, or hold Javonte Williams?
I am actively trying to buy Javonte Williams in leagues that I'm in. My co-host on the podcast that I do, we talked about it on Sunday morning, and he's definitely a guy that I wanted to get a hold of before this game this last week. And obviously we saw that he come in with highest workload that he's had up until any point in this season, and he performed rather well against a very strong Chiefs defense in that game. So I think you're starting to see Javonte Williams start to get ramped up. The usage is piling up, and we're really kind of getting into this nice little niche where I believe you're going to see Javonte Williams really kind of lay in that RB2 area going forward through the rest of the year. So I do like Javonte Williams. He's definitely a guy I want to acquire.
Yeah, me too. It was a guy that I was high on going into the season, and it's been a slower ramp up than any of us wanted. Erickson, let's test the trade waters here with a straight up running back trade here. Aaron Jones, who certainly has a better track record than Javonte Williams, but this year has been just mired in hamstring issues, it feels like, all season long. Who would you rather have rest of season on the side of a trade, Javonte Williams or Aaron Jones?
I mean, Javonte Williams had, 30 touches in the last game he played? I don't know if Aaron Jones has 30 touches all year. So for me, I'm taking the younger running back. We're starting to see a trend here with a lot of these running backs who are underperforming. A lot of them are the older veteran running backs, whereas the young guys, the young bucks, are starting to get ramped up. They're much more efficient when it comes to yards per carry, yards per reception. So future is now. I want the youth. I want Javonte.
Yeah, Brandon, do you agree with that too? That Aaron Jones might still have that name brand value. Maybe you can pull that trade off here. Potentially.
Yeah, I do agree with Erickson there. I think I'm going to want Javonte over Aaron Jones moving the rest of the year. Just primarily, like you said, there's more of the youth factor involved in it, but we're seeing guys going in opposite directions. You're seeing Aaron Jones' workload decrease, A.J. Dillon, maintaining his role on the field, Aaron Jones being banged up. where we're seeing Williams look a little bit more healthy week after week. And he's actually one of the guys that's leading the league in avoided tackles at this rate, coming off of that major ACL tear last year. That's definitely something that's a good sight for fantasy managers out there. And for me, it's definitely a buying opportunity. I'd rather have him over Aaron Jones.
And a fascinating one, too, because if you have Javonte Williams on, certain rosters, they might have been slow to the gate, and now you have him on a bye this week. So this could be an opportunity where somebody who has Javonte is fighting for their fantasy life. And if you give them a piece like Aaron Jones, where they say, well, if Aaron Jones can get healthy, maybe I can go ahead and I want to sell high on Javonte Williams after these last 2 weeks because he's burned me the first 6 weeks of the season. Interesting point of view. Let's flip it around here. Let's try for a wide receiver. Tyler Lockett, Javonte Williams. Which side of this deal? I know a lot of this has to do with roster construction, but just in a vacuum, which side of this deal you want to be on for the rest of the season? Brandon?
Again, I think I'm going to go with Javonte in that scenario there. We're seeing the decimation at the running back position throughout the first 7-8 weeks of the fantasy season. So you can't have enough depth when it comes to that. But we're seeing, the depth at the wide receiver position hold pretty steady through the first 8 weeks of the year. I think I could get a guy, whether he's already on my roster or not, that probably produce well enough week in, week out based on matchups, as well as a Tyler Lockett can. He's involved in a 3-way logjam in Seattle as well, where I can get a guy like Javonte Williams that's on the ascension up. He's on my roster. I'm covered as well if there happens to be an injury to one of my top 2 running backs, if I'm acquiring him as my third.
Erickson, Lockett, or Javonte?
Javonte for me. I mean, Lockett's efficiency numbers have dipped this year because he's an older receiver. Again, we're still, I don't want these old guys on my team. We see the young players emerge in the second half
Erickson.
of the
You're an
fantasy
ageist.
season.
Every time on the live stream, every Thursday, you make some comment about old
so
people.
I can be an ageist.
Really, really getting my patience thin. It's growing thin like that bald cap on Brandon's head. All right, let's get to another here. Let's see if we could do a twofer here. Javonte Williams for Tank Dell and James Conner. So we're talking about buying some bulk here. I know Conner, not back yet, but we're talking about the future of him returning, what that looks like. And Tank Dell, somebody who's a very popular, buzzy name in the fantasy community. So, Erickson, you want Javonte or you want Conner and Dell?
I will take Javonte.
Javonte for you as well. Can I tempt you with a 2-for-1? What do you think, Brandon? Which side of this deal you want to be on?
I might go ahead and take that. I might take that 2-for-1 because the fact is you're getting a James Conner back in return. I think once he returns from injury, we'll see later, obviously with the trade deadline, if Kyler's going to be there, maybe move on, who knows. But if Kyler's there, I think we're going to see a little bit more efficient Cardinals offense coming back. And we've seen Conner in the backfield just usage wise is one of the more he's the top running back in the league as far as workload it comes to that. And then you're also getting a sweetener in the deal with a Tank Dell. Granted, he's boom or bust week to week, depending on matchups. He's came back this last week, didn't perform rather well. A lot of people were hoping to see a bigger game from Tank Dell in week 8. He did not really meet those expectations, but I think that's a situation where coming down the next few weeks heading into fantasy playoffs, he's definitely a guy that I would want to have rostered. And I'm making, in my estimation, almost an even swap with Conner and Javonte Williams there, and I'm getting a sweetener on that deal. Yeah, I would probably take that.
See, I think the bald cap just makes everyone smarter. Like, the ball just makes people smarter, I feel like, at the end of the day. Before we get to the next name of the next highest traded running back in fantasy, I want to remind everybody about, this is the time of year where we're trying to figure out who the pretenders and contenders are, and we're about halfway through the NFL season. But DraftKings Sportsbook is still pumping out unbeatable offers every single game. New customers can bet just $5 on anything and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. No, all customers can take advantage of a sweetener offer every game day this October. In fact, if you want to know what to bet on, go over to Betting Pros, because I just did my top 10 bets of the week and we are on fire there right now. So go subscribe to that channel. But don't forget also to get involved in all the football action on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use that promo code FantasyPros. New customers can bet just $5 on anything and get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook with that promo code FantasyPros. The crown is yours. I don't know where James Cook is now, boys, with the signing of Leonard Fournette. I don't know if we should care about this, not care about this. It's a weird thing, but James Cook is one of these players, Erickson, that people have been disappointed in. And it seems like the Buffalo Bills might be feeling their pain. So do you want to buy, sell, or hold, Erickson, James Cook of the Buffalo Bills?
Oh, I'm buying. Because he's coming at a discount because of Fat Lenny coming in and going to take all of That's not going to happen.
So your ageism and your fat shaming here on the same show. This is very upsetting, Erickson.
Fat Lenny off the couch, playoff Lenny, whatever you want to call him. Look, I think that Leonard Fournette is coming in to take Latavius Murray's job. Because Latavius Murray has been downright horrible. They keep putting him in the red zone. He keeps getting stuffed at the goal line. They wanted to add a compliment to James Cook this offseason. They added Damian Harris, got hurt. They added Latavius Murray. They tried to make it work. He has been horrible. So I think it's really more of they need to fill that compliment role, which they're going to do with Leonard Fournette, or at least try with Leonard Fournette. I think James Cook's role doesn't get changed. Like, he already wasn't seeing a lot of red zone work anyway, and he's still been a fantasy RB2 most weeks. So with this Bills defense still horrible, I think they're going to have to be in up-tempo games, which I want pieces of this offense in, like a James Cook. So for me, this is the perfect opportunity to buy an explosive young running back. Again, we talked about the youth, explosive young running back that I think could still have a lot of big games, and you can get him now super cheap because, oh no, Fournette's going to take his job. Did you guys watch Leonard Fournette play football last year? He's not going to take James Cook's job. He'll take maybe Latavius Murray. Yeah, maybe he does take some red zone work, but again, James Cook wasn't already seeing that work anyway. So it's kind of double counting as like a double negative against James Cook by the addition of Fournette. So I think it's a prime opportunity to buy an explosive young running back.
The prosecution rests. Maybe you should go to jury duty. That's a really good. That was like
hopefully the attorneys don't watch this video because they're like, oh, we need this guy.
You're out of order. This whole courtroom is out of order. Murchison, let's go to you here. What do you want to do with James Cook? It's a pretty convincing argument that there's panic at the disco right now in terms of people saying Leonard Fournette is now in there. And now you've got a situation where people say, oh no, Leonard Fournette, but maybe you should say take advantage of that and try to go buy James Cook.
Yeah, I think it's a recency bias thing. You'll see that with you could probably hone in on that panic for the Leonard Fournette signing this week. But obviously, I think he's going to maintain his spot on the practice squad, I would say, this week. I don't think he will get elevated until next week's game, just as he's learning the offense, kind of getting acclimated into everything. But, Erickson's correct there. James Cook, I don't think his role is going to change too much. You see, he's top 10 at the position, actually in rushing yards on the year, 486. But he's also number 7 in receiving yards at 192. So he's maintaining kind of that dual running back feature right now that they've been able to use. His only drawback, of course, like Erickson mentioned, is the fact that he just does not see work inside the 20s, which is a little bit disconcerting for the fantasy managers that were expecting to see that role increase this year. But now I think there might be a position where you can go to that James Cook manager this week and be, hey, Fournette's coming in, he's a proven commodity. He's going to take some of that workload away, and you might be able to kind of come down on that asking price for a James Cook and acquire him.
All right, let's test the waters here. James Cook or Gus Edwards, who would you rather have rest of season? Which side of that trade, Merch?
Oh, I'm taking James Cook all day there. I think Gus Edwards kind of a flash in the pan the last couple of weeks.
Well, more on that later in a second, because I know Erickson has all the feels about Gus Edwards, so I'm going to save that one. James Cook or Courtland Sutton? This one hits you in the feels, Erickson, as Courtland Sutton continues to catch touchdown after touchdown these last few weeks. Now, Sutton's on a bye, so you got to take that into account, too. The feeling of needing to win. Cook has an interesting matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. Game's got a decent total. Who would you rather have, Sutton or Cook, this week, rest of season?
I mean, yeah, I'd rather have Cook. I mean, the fact that Sutton's on a bye week, he can't catch touchdown this week. It's actually unless he gets traded and ends up playing this week. Who knows? Maybe that happens.
You stole it from me. I was going to say, well, I could get out. This is the time.
I mean, even if these guys were equal in a vacuum, which I don't even think they really are, I would much rather prefer the running back versus the wide receiver. Running back is just harder to replace, especially with bye weeks. So it's easy James Cook for me.
All right, I'm going to try to pile up some things because people love to do this in fantasy leagues. Let me put up a couple things here and see if I can get up to a higher player. James Cook for Rashee Rice and Kareem Hunt. Does that get James Cook from you, Andrew Erickson?
I think I actually like the two players here. I think Hunt is Hunt is kind of like the anti-James Cook, where he gets all the red zone usage in that backfield, even though they're kind of mixing in some other guys. But again, he's a little bit of an older back, so I don't love that. But then the fact that I get the youth injection with Rashee Rice, who I absolutely adore, as the pseudo wide receiver one on the Chiefs. So I think that I would take the 2-for-1 there if I can start both the guys, probably in some leagues where I'm starting like multiple flex positions.
Don't think that I didn't hear you kind of, slide that age quote about Kareem Hunt just right underneath me.
These are facts.
That old guy like that. Someday you'll be old too, Erickson.
Hey,
someday.
I'm not 30 yet. Not 30 yet.
Not 30 yet. Any minute now, I feel like, though. We're getting really close.
Next May.
I want to take you out for your 30th birthday. That's what I want to do. That's going to be the party. Brandon, you're invited. Brandon, who would you rather have here? James Cook, Rashee Rice, and Kareem Hunt. What side of this deal? The Cook side or the Rice and Hunt side?
I believe I would take the 2 players in that deal as well.
Okay.
I'm kind of bigger on Rashee Rice myself. We're seeing that usage in that Kansas City Chiefs rotation is increasing over the last few weeks. But the Kareem Hunt aspect too, like Erickson mentioned, he's getting the red zone work, so you're always going to see scoring opportunities there with Kareem Hunt. Whereas if you want to play devil's advocate with James Cook, you could say Leonard Fournette coming in. He's been a guy that's been really involved in the passing game and could take away that, some of the receptions that James Cook has gotten up until this point. That could be kind of an argument that you could make there, and I would probably take the 2 players back in that deal.
All right, let's highlight some of the guys' favorite buy lows and sell highs. Let's go to you first, Brandon. Give me the running back you're most interested in buying low on in Week 9.
As of right now, I'm going to go with Joe Mixon. Obviously the stats have not been there. He's been a little bit underperforming and a little bit disappointing for fantasy managers out there. But what do we look for in a running back when it comes to fantasy? Workload. And that's something that Mixon has been really good at through this first 8 weeks of the fantasy season. And we saw him get into the end zone in that bad matchup against the San Francisco 49ers this last week. And as the Bengals start to round into shape, which I think that they're starting to do now with Joe Burrow really getting fully healthy, I think that's an intriguing thing for Joe Mixon going forward. If he maintains that usage, I think there's going to be more scoring opportunities abound for him. And it's definitely an opportunity for me to buy low at this point.
You could sense it too. It's like, wow, terrible matchup against the 49ers on paper. Mixon's going to score a touchdown. Like you just do. Like that is what fantasy in 2023 has been. Erickson, who's a buy low fantasy RB for you?
It's Tony Pollard for the Dallas Cowboys. Basically had pretty much the worst run out you could ask for. We got all the usage, but like Thanos, we had to give up the one thing we wanted the most, which was actual fantasy points for Tony Pollard, which have just not been present for him. But the thing I want to point out here with Pollard is his points per game this year through the first 8 weeks is actually the exact same as it was last year through the first 8 weeks. Now, how we've gotten there is very different because obviously Ezekiel Elliott was involved and Tony Pollard wasn't
Zeke's still there. It's like the ghost of Ezekiel Elliott is still there, and somehow he's taking all the touchdowns away.
They need to trade. They need to bring Zeke back from the Patriots to then unleash Tony Pollard. So, but I bring that up because in the second half of last year, he finished as the RB4 overall. So we've seen this before with Tony Pollard. Now he's coming off the broken leg injury. Maybe that has to do kind of with his slower start. And the fact of the matter is, like, he's just been running so bad when it comes to touchdowns. But we know Tony Pollard's a good player. We know he's an efficient player. And I want to buy, especially right now. He's hit rock bottom. They're facing the Eagles this week. Nobody wants Tony Pollard. But when you just take a step back and be like, oh, I want the number one running back who's basically leading the NFL in red zone touches and has 2 touchdowns. Like, that's not going to sustain over the rest of the season. So if you need a running back that can deliver a league-winning upside, we've seen it before with Tony Pollard, I'm buying.
I'm so mad because you know me, we do the Betting Pro show together every week, Erickson. And I don't do a lot of parlays, but I had a parlay. I've had the tease of the Dallas Cowboys, and boy, oh boy, did they cover their points. The over on the CeeDee Lamb receptions at 5.5. And then just Tony Pollard to score a touchdown. That was it. Just Tony Pollard. I was like 43 points and I can't get a Tony Pollard touchdown. I just frustrations abound. Let's go back to you, Erickson. I teased this before. A sell high running back, in your opinion, is who?
Gus Edwards, because trust the process. When a guy scores 3 touchdowns, you try to trade him because he's never going to score 3 touchdowns in the same game again. Like, we did it last week, talked about Deontay Foreman. What did Deontay Foreman do on Sunday Night Football? He did nothing. He did nothing. So I'm doing the exact same thing here with Gus Edwards. I think this is a prime time. Again, we talked about it earlier, how he's been running hot the last couple of weeks. Been a lot of good matchups for him against some favorable defenses where the Ravens have been able to play with strong leads. So, but he's still in a committee with Justice Hill where in games that are more back and forth, fast paced, they prefer using Justice Hill in that receiving role where Gus Edwards is really their grinder back that they like to use to close out games. So he's been running hot in terms of touchdowns. I just think right now is the perfect time to sell high on a running back that we've seen a pretty large sample size of Gus Edwards. He's never really been an RB1, someone that's been a league winner. He doesn't have a lot of pass game juice. So I would sell high on the touchdown production, especially when you look at the next two matchups. Seahawks, Browns, two tough run defenses, and not necessarily games that I expect the Ravens to run away with in terms of the projected spreads.
Brandon Murchison, or Joe Bro, as I like to call you now, who is your top sell high running back for week 9?
Look, and I'm kind of taking a similar track as Erickson here. Is my sell high is Jahmyr Gibbs. Oh my goodness, we don't want to sell Jahmyr Gibbs. That he's the darling of the fantasy community. But let's look at it from the darling of the fantasy
community. You've shattered all of my.
You really are.
Okay.
You got to refresh your X feed, man. You got to refresh that feed.
Probably. I should stay off that thing. Anyway, Brandon.
So with Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously we've seen the last 2 weeks he's been top 5 at the position in scoring. Obviously, no David Montgomery hasn't been there. I think this is a prime opportunity where you can use him. They're going into the bye here in week 9. If you're a Jahmyr Gibbs fantasy manager, more than likely you're kind of in that middle ground in the standings, and with where you're placing in fantasy leagues right now, you might be in that I need to win now mode, things like that. You can move him based on what he's doing right now. Find that owner and that manager out there that's, hey, yeah, I think that's going to be a sign of things to come with Jahmyr Gibbs. But we all know come week 10, when David Montgomery potentially comes back, that's Dan Campbell's guy. And he's said it over and over again. That is his guy. And he will get back into the David Montgomery role that we've seen in the weeks prior to the injury. And it's going to put Jahmyr Gibbs back in more to that complementary role. And he's not going to see the usage that he's seen the last 2 weeks. And he's going to be a little bit disappointing for the guys that are holding on to him. And I think similar to Gus Edwards, it's a situation where you can sell high based on the production of the last 2 weeks.
Before we get to our listener mailbag, let's remind everybody, if you need new tires for your car, Discount Tire is your go-to. They have exceptional service, and you get 30% shorter average wait time. That's huge. When you buy and book online at discounttire.com, they have this really cool feature too called Treadwell, not Laquan Treadwell, just Treadwell, which is an online tire buying guide that gives you transparency on the tire performance as well as personalized recommendations based on your location and driving habits. Discount Tire is also the largest independent tire retailer in the country, so it has the biggest selection of tires and wheels. And here's a pro tip from the experts at Discount Tire. You can prevent wear and boost gas mileage even by keeping your tires properly inflated. Tire pressure supports the weight of your vehicle, and it's important to check that for safety. So if it's been over a month since you last checked your tire pressure, stop by one of their local stores for a free tire safety air pressure check. Discount Tire, let's get you taken care of. Let's get some of the people taken care of here with some of our listener mailbag questions, a little 3 and out. This one's from Lunzo. I had Waller go down. Would you trade Stroud and Downs for Laporta, or try and snag McBride off waivers instead? Merch, what do you think about this question? What would you do here?
Ooh, man. I think that's a situation where, obviously we just talked about Laporta's on bye this week, so it's not going to do you any good to make that trade this week. You're still going to need to go find a tight end there. For me, I'd go grab McBride off of the waivers. We've seen that usage over the last few weeks has been excellent. This last week, now, obviously a tough matchup against Baltimore. He really excelled, put up tight end 1 numbers this week. I think that's a sign of things to come with McBride. Personally, I would go get McBride here in this situation and keep the assets on my roster.
Erickson, Lad96 wants to know, do you think I can get Bijan for Hawkinson? Seems unlikely now with Cousins out, don't you think?
I mean, it just depends on how someone views their tight end situation. Like if they don't have a tight end, like they may view Hawkinson as an upgrade regardless of the quarterback situation. And again, it's tougher to sell a lot of these Vikings players because obviously when you lose your starting quarterback, like no one's like, oh, I want to buy all these Vikings players unless you're just like really, really diving deep as like really buy lows. You can't really sell them for a lot. So especially with Bijan coming off a touchdown game, I think this probably won't go through. You can try.
All right, last one. It's Halloween. Everybody talks about what's your favorite candy. What was the candy you got as a kid when someone or something for Halloween that you would get in your Halloween bucket or bag? that you hated, that you didn't like, the first thing off the island, Erickson. Come on, every kid has that. I was like, oh, what's the one win of candy? That's boring. Everybody does that. I want to go negative, Erickson. What's the thing you want to get rid of?
The worst Halloween candy is dots. And it's not even
that's a
close.
bad one. I don't even know what there is nothing natural about those. Like any of I don't know what's
bad.
in them. That's a bad one. And they come in that little box
really
too.
Is.
Merch for you. How about you? Was there one candy that you just couldn't stand?
Absolutely, it's Almond Joy.
That's
Can't
a good one
do
too.
it. Get it out of my bag. Get it out of there. No, I can't stand coconut. Get it out of my bag. I would throw it back to the person giving it to me.
There you go. I'm so old that I remember my grandma, she used to have a thing of change and she would give like nickels and quarters and things out. That's old school New York right there. That's what you get for Halloween. I don't know what you're buying for a nickel, but hopefully we bought some running backs here on the show today. Brandon Murchison, amazing job as always. Go check out all of his work at Rotoballer and check him out on the X machine at Roto Superstar, and go make sure you sync all your leagues to My Playbook. Use all of the tools at My Playbook, including the Trade Finder and the Trade Analyzer, all available for you. That'll do it for us, but the story of the game goes on. For Andrew Erickson and Brandon Murchison, I'm Joey P. We'll see you next time, kids.